South Korea is set to reduce the mandatory quarantine period for those infected with COVID-19 from 7 to 5 days as early as May in one of the last steps toward complete pre-pandemic normalcy. The Summit for Democracy is underway, with South Korean President Yoon to deliver his message on solidarity for freedom and prosperity. The Yoon administration takes major action to boost domestic spending, rolling out gift certificates, coupons, and cash incentives for the tourism sector. Good afternoon. We begin with South Korea's freshly unveiled roadmap detailing its final few steps back to pre-pandemic normalcy. That is, reducing the period of mandatory self-quarantine for people infected with COVID-19 as early as May, as the government seeks to downgrade the COVID-19 alert level for the first time in 3 years. Our Choi Soo-young has the details.
The mandatory COVID-19 self-quarantine period for people infected in South Korea could soon be shortened from 7 to 5 days as the government considers downgrading the COVID alert level. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said a decision will be made in early May.
In May, a decision will be made on whether to lower the COVID-19 alert level from serious to caution, together with a reduction in the quarantine period from 7 days to 5 days.
This would be the first downgrade in the COVID alert level since February 2020. And it means the remaining restrictions will go away as well, including the rule of mask wearing in facilities like hospitals and pharmacies. The South Korean government sees the COVID situation stabilizing thanks to a high rate of vaccination. Prime Minister Han called the shortening of self-quarantine the first step toward ending the long fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Summit for Democracy kicked off on Tuesday, aimed at enhancing global solidarity for democracy while countering the growing influence of Russia and China. Topping the meeting on the first day was a call for peace in Ukraine. Our Moon has the details.
This year's summit opened with a preliminary session hosted by Washington on Tuesday local time to highlight the key themes to be discussed over the next 3 days. It kicked off with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stressing the need for peace in Ukraine. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was originally scheduled to join the session, he was unable to attend as he extended his tour of the war's front lines. In his keynote speech, Blinken reiterated his support for a plan to establish peace in Ukraine through the full withdrawal of Russian troops, and expressed opposition to a proposal made by China following President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow last week, saying it would only benefit Russia. Blinken also led a session on empowering women in democratic society to promote gender equality. An issue highlighted during his speech was the online harassment and abuse that women and girls face, which showcased the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse initiative announced at the first summit 2 years ago. Other key topics on the agenda included countering corruption, led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and strengthening unions between democratic societies. The main conference will be co-hosted by the United States, South Korea, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and Zambia the following day, with each co-host leading a virtual live session on a variety of topics. During Biden's first Summit for Democracy in 2021, around 110 countries were in attendance. This year, around 120 countries will be taking part, including Taiwan, despite China's efforts to exclude Taiwan from such multinational events. Moon Arirang News.
And South Korean President Yoon will begin his Summit for Democracy co-hosting duties on Wednesday. The president is set to issue joint opening remarks with leaders of the United States, Costa Rica, Zambia, and the Netherlands. You will then host the first leader-level plenary session on democracy delivering economic growth and shared prosperity. The session will involve activists and figures from civil society. On Thursday, Seoul will hold a hybrid regional meeting representing the Indo-Pacific with a focus on tackling corruption. The Summit for Democracy was launched in 2021 by U.S. President Joe Biden to address the growing challenges to civil and political rights and human rights across the world. In other news, following North Korea's testing of what it claims to be tactical ballistic missiles loaded with simulated nuclear warheads, the U.S. says Washington is committed to finding a diplomatic solution with the North or ramping up its defense capabilities against the regime's evolving nuclear threats. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Speaking at a virtual press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says the U.S. will continue to build its defense capabilities against North Korea's evolving nuclear threats, adding that the regime has been ignoring Washington's calls for dialogue. According to Kirby, the U.S. has not changed its desire to sit down with the regime in Pyongyang without precondition to find a diplomatic way forward to the verifiable denuclearization of the peninsula. However, he added that Washington is aware that North Korea is trying to improve the capabilities of its ballistic missiles and will continue to pursue its nuclear ambitions. So in response, he says the U.S. will continue to make sure that it has the appropriate military capabilities and the appropriate readiness to use such capabilities to protect its national security interests and those of its allies, including South Korea. His comments come as North Korea has been testing tactical ballistic missiles capable of mounting simulated nuclear warheads. At the same time, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly been guiding the regime's nuclear program, calling for the expanded production of weapons-grade nuclear materials to further increase its nuclear arsenal. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim also called for flawless preparation for the use of nuclear weapons anytime and anywhere. Meanwhile, during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on a defense budget request on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said Washington and Seoul are working to strengthen their joint defense capabilities against North Korea's evolving threats. He also reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to providing extended deterrence for South Korea and Japan, stressing that the three countries are able to demonstrate their ability to respond to any North Korean provocation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Japan has once again approved its school textbooks entailing misleading information on key territorial and historical issues between Seoul and Tokyo. Seoul has immediately launched strong complaints against Japan. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
Japan has yet again approved the publication of textbooks that contain misleading historical claims. A textbook screening committee under Japan's Education Ministry on Tuesday approved 149 textbooks to be used in elementary schools from 2024. In some of the textbooks for 3rd to 6th grade elementary school students, Tokyo decided to dilute the extent of the coercion used in the conscription of Korean men during Japan's colonial rule. In a book for 6th graders, the current sentence, "Korean men were conscripted as soldiers of the Japanese army," will be changed to "Korean men participated in the Japanese army as soldiers, and conscription came after." Korean men were also described as young people who voluntarily joined the Japanese army. In another book, the term conscripted was removed altogether. The current elementary school textbooks do not contain content on the so-called comfort women, so not much is expected to have changed regarding forced labor. But in one of the textbooks from next year, the term "brought in" will be changed to "mobilized" when describing that a large number of Koreans and Chinese were forcibly brought into Japan. Japan has also further solidified its claim over South Korea's Dokdo Islets in the East Sea. More textbooks will describe Dokdo as being an inherent territory of Japan or that Korea is illegally occupying the islets. Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday summoned an official from the Japanese embassy in Korea and strongly protested Tokyo's claim to Dokdo, saying the islets are clearly Korea's inherent territory historically, geographically, and under international law. It also expressed strong regret that forced labor is being described in a way that dilutes the nature of the coercion. The ministry urged Japan to behave more responsibly in educating future generations. As it says, having the correct historical awareness lays the foundation for establishing a future-oriented relationship. The changes in the textbooks come as the countries were off to a fresh start following South Korea's announcement of compensating Japan's wartime forced labor in the Seoul-Tokyo summit. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Yoon administration is set to take a major action to boost domestic consumption by rolling out gift certificates, coupons, and cash incentives for the tourism sector. The president was speaking at the 15th Emergency Economic Cabinet meeting on Wednesday. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho says the government will spend more than $46 million on giving out coupons for hotels and leisure activities. In addition, those who are self-employed as well as employed at small and medium-sized companies receive around $8 in cash for vacations. There will also be tax incentives offered for spending on cultural activities and at traditional markets. Also, to facilitate the government's goal of attracting some 10 million travelers to South Korea, the government will temporarily lift visa requirements for travelers from 22 countries, such as the US, Japan, and Canada. Consumers in South Korea still expect high inflation to continue in the coming months, but at a lower rate. According to a Bank of Korea survey this month, consumers believe inflation will average 3.9% over the next 12 months. That's down 0.1 of a percentage point from February, showing a drop-off for the first time in 3 months. The central bank attributed the drop to falling oil prices as well as soaring consumer prices. The composite consumer sentiment index for March hit a 9-month high of 92, up 1.8 points from the month before. The index measures consumer opinion on the economy, with a figure below 100, meaning more pessimism than optimism. Business sentiment among South Korean companies remains bleak. According to the Federation of Korean Industries, the estimate for next month's business sentiment index across all industries came to 1993 rather. A reading below 100 signals a pessimistic economic outlook. This will be the 13th month in a row that the BSI has been below 100. The FKI attributed the negative business outlook to the downward trend in the electronics industry, which makes up roughly 1/3 of the nation's exports. South Korea's Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics both won Partner of the Year, Sustained Excellence titles at the 2023 Energy Star Awards on Tuesday. The annual Energy Star Awards, hosted by the Environmental Protection Agency and Department of the Energy in the U.S., recognizes businesses and organizations committed to energy efficiency. The Partner of the Year Sustained Excellence title is the highest honor that can be achieved and is presented to firms and organizations that have already been named Partner of the Year for a minimum of 2 years in a row. Samsung Electronics took the title for the 11th year running this year. LG Electronics won the award for the 8th year in a row. The 2030 World Expo is still 7 years away, but the host city will be decided this November. South Korea's coastal city of Busan is considered one of the top 2 candidates to hold the mega event, and the competition is heating up each passing day. To hear more on just how important it is for South Korea to bring the expo home, our political correspondent Han Song-woo had an exclusive sit-down with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo.
Transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. It's the official slogan South Korea has put out to let the world know its southern coastal city of Busan is ready to host World Expo 2030. And there's nobody more confident of that in the country than Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who's also serving as co-chair of the nation's bidding committee.
부산은 바로 대한민국을 상징하는 모든 요소를 다 가지고 있습니다. 6.25 전쟁을 통해서 최고로 빈곤한 그러한 상황을 가진 그런 분들이 북한에서 말하자면 피난을 해오셨고, 그분들이 정말 어려운 삶을 살아가면서도 자기의 생활을 더 진전시키고 더 나은 생활을 이루어서 지금은 정말 세계 어디 내놓아도 부끄럽지 않은 그러한 세계 제2의 그런 그 환적 항구로서의 역할을 하고 있는 대한민국의 압축된 역사를 그대로 보여주면서 또 대외적으로의 교류를 활발히 해온 그러한 도시입니다.
World Expo 2030 is still years away, and the Bureau International des Expositions has yet to select the host city, which will be elected by member states in a General Assembly slated for November in Paris, on the principle of one country, one vote. But the competition's already heating up, with the BIE set to conduct an inspection on site in Busan early next month. That's why the Prime Minister, along with the chiefs of South Korea's most well-known corporations, have been seeking out meetings with foreign dignitaries and ambassadors to spread the word that there's just no place like Busan.
그분들이 대한민국 부산이 가장 박람회를 개최하는 적지다. 이런 그 확신을 가질 수 있도록 그분들을 그룹별로 만나기도 하고 실제로 방문하기도 하고 저만이 아니고 우리 기업들하고 또 부산시와 원팀이 돼가지고 그동안에 약 150개국 정도를 접촉을 하고 방문을 하고 했습니다.
If held in Busan, the mega event and its exhibitions will revolve around 3 sub-themes: sustainable living with nature, technology for humanity, and lastly, platform for caring and sharing.
2030은 단순히 어떤 현재의 그런 그 산업의 발전 상태를 보여주는 것이 아니고 전 세계와 더불어서 앞으로 우리가 지속 가능한 발전, 기후변화에 대한 대응, 포용적 성장을 이루기 위해서 어떻게 해야 되는가, 어떻게 협력해야 되는가.
To bring attention to such global challenges on home soil, though, the country will have to get past a formidable competitor, equally as eager to announce itself on the world stage, Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh. Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, is seen as Busan's biggest rival to host the Expo. In what ways is Busan the better candidate than Riyadh?
글쎄요, 여러 가지 이유가 있겠습니다만은 우선 부산은 훨씬 저는 아름다운 도시다 이런 생각이 들고요. 또 훨씬 개방된 도시다. 모든 일을 좀 더 자유롭게 할 수 있는 그런 민주주의, 인권, 개방 경제 이런 것들을 실천하고 있는 그런 그 도시죠.
Holding the 2030 World Expo in Busan would make South Korea one of a select few countries in the world to host the Olympics, the World Cup, and the World Expo, an honor that further motivates the government to ramp up its bidding efforts.
Don't miss the best opportunity, which will work as a permanent reminder on your mind that you really will have enjoy the best memories in your life.
한성우, Arirang News.
8 of the 10 best-selling albums globally in 2022 were by K-pop groups. On Monday, the International Federation of Phonographic Industry released its global album sales chart, which listed 10 best-selling albums around the world in the previous year. With the exception of albums by J.Choo in first, Taylor Swift in third, K-pop acts took over the list. Leading the 8 K-pop albums was the BTS anthology album Proof, which took the chart's overall number 2 spot. Also on the list were 2 albums by the Stray Kids, 2 by 17 and 1 by Hyphen, and Blackpink and Tomorrow by Together.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Mexico, there are reports of a number of deaths caused by a fire at a migrant detention center. At least 40 people have been killed and over 24 injured in a fire at the National Migration Institute in Ciudad Juarez City, located near the United States border. Among the victims were migrants who had come from Central and South America, hoping to enter the U.S. According to authorities, the fire broke out around 9:30 p.m. on Monday local time. They suspect that migrants who had been caught earlier on Monday set mattresses ablaze in the facility after hearing that they would be deported. The fire comes as the US-Mexico border has seen an influx of migrants as Title 42, a restrictive pandemic-era border policy that gives the US government power to eject migrants at its border, is set to expire. Turning over to the European Union now, as the 27-nation bloc has finalized a plan that effectively bans the sale of new fossil fuel cars by the year 2035. The deal was made official in Brussels on Tuesday, local time, after a meeting between EU energy and transport ministers. It calls for a 100% reduction in CO2 emissions by the cut-off date for car manufacturers, which effectively prohibits the sale of new combustion vehicles. However, one exemption was made, as Germany successfully campaigned to allow the sale of vehicles that only use e-fuels, which is a technology combining hydrogen and carbon dioxide to make synthetic fuels. The new regulation marks an acceleration of efforts to switch to electric vehicles and tackle climate change. Data show that cars make up 12% of the EU's total carbon emissions. Meanwhile, in the Twitter space, CEO Elon Musk has announced a new set of changes. According to a tweet by the billionaire on Monday, only those with paid Twitter Blue accounts will have their tweets featured on the recommended For You page. The changes also restricts voting on Twitter polls to users with a blue check verified account. Musk says the measures are the only realistic way to clamp down on AI bots that have flooded the platform. The bots have been an issue for years for Twitter, spreading fake news and spam accounts. The changes will be implemented on April 15th, with membership costing $7 per month when paying a one-year membership upfront, or $8 on a month-to-month basis. And finally, a giant meatball made using extinct woolly mammoth DNA has been unveiled. Created by Australian cultured meat company VOW, the meatball was displayed at the Nemo Science Museum in the Netherlands on Tuesday, local time. The meatball was created by inserting a mammoth gene mixed with African elephant DNA into sheep stem cells, which were replicated to grow. The company said the mammoth meatball was made to get people talking about cultured meat, seen as a sustainable alternative to real meat, and to raise awareness of climate change, as it's believed to have played a role in the mammoth's extinction, alongside hunting by humans. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's another day with big temperature swings between day and night in most parts of the country. After a chilly start, temperatures are warming into the 20s this afternoon under mostly sunny skies. It's going to feel more like the end of April today. So as you might have guessed, much of Korea are covered with unsafe levels of ultrafine dust. And it looks like being an even dustier day tomorrow, and perhaps for the rest of the week. Meanwhile, a dry weather advisory remains in place in the capital and central inland regions and now has been expanded to parts of the south. Morning temperatures were 2 to 4 degrees higher than the same time yesterday, but highs are rising fast along with sunshine. Daejeon will be topping out at 22 degrees, Daegu, Gyeongju 21 degrees this afternoon. Now, after a big warm-up, we are cooling down fast overnight, so do dress accordingly, while a big warm-up is expected for the rest of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day.